Today we will be reading Exploring Antarctica again. Make sure you get your book out, and I want you to follow along and read along with me. If you need to pause the video at any point, go right ahead. Exploring Antarctica by Lisa Benjamin. Exploring Antarctica. The North Pole and the South Pole. Remember, this is our heading. Just like our topic, it tells us what the section is going to be about. The North Pole and the South Pole are very cold parts of the Earth. For a very long time, no explorer ever saw either place. In 1909, explorers traveled to the North Pole. They wanted to be the first to see this famous place. It took a long time, but finally they made it to the top of Earth. This made other explorers think about going to the South Pole. Some people call the South Pole the bottom of Earth. So let's take a look at the image up above. We see North Pole and South Pole labeled in this picture. The Earth's North and South Poles have drawn many explorers to face the challenge of reaching these cold, distant places. If we look at this photo as seen from space, can you find the North Pole? Where's the South Pole? When some explorers finally reached the North Pole after many tries, what do you think this made other explorers want to do? A difficult journey. What do you think this section will be about based on this heading? The South Pole was harder to reach than the North Pole. The South Pole is in the center of the continent of Antarctica. The surrounding seas are dangerous, the winds strong, and the water freezing. Once the explorers reached Antarctica, they would have to cross miles of ice to reach the South Pole. In the early 1900s, there were no airplanes. The only way to make the trip was on sleds. You might think that no one would want to make this journey. In fact, two different teams decided to do it. Up top, as we discussed yesterday, we see a drawing of the globe, and we can see the South Pole inside of Antarctica. Around it, we can see those rough, dangerous seas that they were talking about. Can you find the 3 different oceans that surround Antarctica? A race between 2 teams. The 2 teams set out in 1911. They were in a race to see who would get to the South Pole first. Roald Amundsen, let's say that again, Roald Amundsen led one team. He was an explorer from Norway. The other team was led by Robert Scott. He was an explorer from Great Britain. The 2 men knew the trip would not be easy. Both teams used sleds. Scott's team pulled their sleds themselves. Dogs pulled Amundsen's sleds. Many of the men wore snowshoes. The webbed bottoms kept them from sinking in the snow. Look at the photograph up above. How does that photograph help you understand the information we just read about in the text? Amundsen's team got a head start. They had great weather. There were no storms. They traveled quickly. But the weather changed by the time Scott set out. His team faced blizzards. Winds whistled and howled. Snow swirled around. The men grew weak from pulling their own sleds. Scott's team was losing the race. Let's take a moment to look at these two pages we've just read, pages 4 and pages 5. Look at the photographs. These are historical. They were taken in the early 1900s, and they show people and events from that time. What is different about these two photos? Which team do you think would have a harder time? The men pulling their own sleds or the men with dog teams? Why? A brave journey back. In January 1912, Robert Scott finally reached the South Pole. But Amundsen had gotten there first. Amundsen had left behind a tent and a book to show that his team had been there. Scott's team turned around to go back. They did not have enough to eat. One member fell on slippery ice and was badly hurt. Others got sick. Then the team ran into a fierce blizzard. Weak, sick, and hungry, they couldn't survive the storm. Many people today still remember Scott as a brave explorer. The journey was hard, but he never gave up. What did we find out about Robert Scott and his journey that would make him a brave explorer? Ernest Shackleton. 2 years later, Ernest Shackleton tried to reach the South Pole. He was a junior member of Robert Scott's team, but he had not made the trip with Scott. He got sick just before they left and had to stay behind. Shackleton planned his own trip. He did not want to see only the South Pole. He wanted to cross the whole continent of Antarctica. In 1914, his team left England. They traveled in a boat. Shackleton never even reached Antarctica. On the way, his ship got stuck. The seas were packed with ice and it was too hard to steer. They were trapped. Slowly, the ice began to crush the ship. It was going to sink. The team had to get off. Otherwise, they would drown. Let's pause for a moment and look at these two historical photos. What has happened to the ship shown in the photo on page 9? Would you be able to steer a ship that is stuck in ice? Sailors can't control the way a ship moves unless the ship is in open water. Otherwise, it just stays where it is, as we can see on page 9. After they left the ship, Shackleton and his team were stuck on a large piece of floating ice. They drifted for months. The weather grew warmer. The ice started to break up. So they climbed into small boats. As they sailed toward land, huge waves washed into their boats. The team got soaked. Their clothes were not waterproof. Shackleton's team finally reached an island, but they were far from help. So Shackleton got back into one of the boats with 5 men. The rest of the team set up camp and waited. Shackleton kept sailing. The seas were stormy and dangerous, and it seemed hopeless. Shackleton sailed for a month. Then he finally reached South Georgia Island. People there helped rescue the rest of the team. Luckily, everyone made it home. Shackleton's trip was not a success, but he is still known for his courage. He saved his team when all hope was lost. Today, scientists reach the South Pole by airplane. They hope to learn more about Antarctica. The science station there is named after Amundsen and Scott. I'm going to shrink this down to just page 14. Take a look at this timeline. It shows important dates from trips to Antarctica. So let's take a look at the timeline together. We use a timeline to help us put events in order by year. It makes it easier for us to tell when things happen. The title of this timeline is Antarctica Trips. We start with the winter of 1911. Scott and Amundsen sail to Antarctica. December 1911, Amundsen reaches the South Pole. January 1912, Scott reaches the South Pole. If we follow that down, we come to March 1912. Scott's team faces a fierce storm. Then, look, we go down a couple of years now. We skip past 1913 and come down to August of 1914. Shackleton sets sail for Antarctica. In January of 1915, Shackleton's ship gets stuck in the ice. November 1915, Shackleton's ship sinks. And finally, in May of 1916, Shackleton reaches South Georgia Island. Let's look at the events for Shackleton. Where is he first noted on the timeline? Let's look. We see August 1914, he sets sail. How many years pass before he finally reaches South Georgia Island? Well, that doesn't happen until 1916, so that's 2 whole years. Oh my goodness, that is a long time to be stranded without help. How could we describe Shackleton and his team of adventurers? What makes you say that? Can you find evidence in your text? Great work with your book, my friends. It's now time for us to work on some main idea and details.